Jaya Sriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Surya Jayate. International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate. Om Hari Om. Namaste, everyone. It is absolutely my pleasure to be here with you this evening. What for us in Omaha, Nebraska is evening. But of course, we know we have people tuning in both live and then as far as the recording from literally throughout the entire world, pretty much every continent. So I welcome you all to our latest satsangha. Before I jump into the talk for today, in which we will be speaking more about how to become dear to God, I first just want to say a few things. First of all, I want to say Happy New Year. Happy New Year to everyone. And I am hoping, I believe that in many ways, this is indeed going to be a good year for everyone, 2023. You know, as we know, the world has been going through so many challenges in the last several years. A person would have to be living under a rock or on the moon to not be aware of that. The entire world has gone through so many challenges. Good things have happened, many bad things have happened. But in any case, we know that the world right now is going through a transition and has been for several years. And like nature herself, transitions take time. There are no instant transitions when it comes to things of importance. But we know that 2022 was a challenging year for many people. And then for others, it was good. I can tell you, as a kind of an informal year-end report, for the International Sanatana Dharma Society, 2022 was our best year yet in terms of everything, literally everything, as far as people who are involved, the quality of the individuals who are involved, plans that we created for the future, projects that we are working on, etc., etc., etc. 2022 was a truly phenomenal year for the ISDS. And let me tell you, 2023 is going to be a lot better than even this previous year. So I want to again wish you all not only a wonderful new year, but I wish you all happiness and joy and prosperity and all the wonderful things that you need in order to be happy in this world. It is my prayer that this will be a year of wonderful and good spiritual growth for all of you, and that 2023 will be a wonderful year to remember in every way. Evam bhavattu. May it be so. Very good. With that, now let us jump into the talk for today. As people may know, those individuals who have been coming for several weeks now, we've been in the midst of a series that we're doing. And what we've been doing is going through several sequential verses from the Bhagavad Gita, from chapter 12 very specifically, in which Krishna repeats this same line again and again and again at the end of each of these verses about how by doing X thing that the verse explains, this is how we become dear to God. This is how we become dear to Krishna. So this is part of a series. So we're going to end the series today by looking at the last three verses of this series. And these last three verses, like the previous verses, are absolutely beautiful in every way. So we'll take our time, we'll go through these verses. These verses, just like again the previous ones, have so much to teach us, and very specifically on this very intimate and crucial topic of how do we become dear to God. I'm going to repeat, maybe in different wording, what I said at the very beginning of this series, and that is that there's philosophy, there is religion, there is spirituality, there is the realm of ideas, etc., etc., etc. But ultimately, this is actually our goal, is to become dear to God. First of all, if we're going to do anything with, play around with philosophy and religion and spirituality, etc., 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 first of all, we should aim for the highest goal. Not a low goal, not a goal that's temporary, not a goal that cheats us from our soul's inner desire. Rather, we should go for the highest. The reason why we do philosophy and spirituality, etc., etc., is because, it should be because, we wish to know God. We wish to know God in the highest, in the greatest detail, in the greatest depth, and more than anything, in a radically personal context. In other words, when we say know God, of course, for most people, they'll understand this philosophically. Oh, I want to know God, meaning I want to know how God functions. What makes God tick. That's a very lowbrow approach to both philosophy and spirituality. Now, these things are important. It helps us in our spiritual journey to know what is the nature of God. But more than anything, if we truly, truly want to know God, not just intellectually, but if we truly want our soul to truly know God and the experience of God, what that means is that above all things, we should aspire to indeed be dear to God. That is, to understand God as our very best friend. See, God already knows that we are God's friend. God treats us like this all the time, that we are God's friend. We're the ones who have to remind ourselves that indeed God is our very best friend. And if we wish to achieve the very heights of spirituality, what this means is to love God, and to love God purely. Not to love God like you love chocolate ice cream. Not to love God like you love your car. Not to love God like you love your favorite movie or TV show. No, not in that sense. A transcendent love that is something that is innate to our very soul, to our Atman itself. We are meant to cultivate such love, such devotion in such a way that we are in perfect, loving, devotional communion with the divine. This is our goal spiritually. This is the goal, the highest goal of Sanatana Dharma, of the eternal natural way. This is the goal of Vaishnava Dharma, which is the very apex of Sanatana Dharma, is to know God that deeply, that intimately, in eternal loving relationship. Well, these verses that we've looked at, this is going to be the third in this series, so for the last 3 times, these verses explain to us exactly how to accomplish this. So now, with that, let's dive into these next 3 verses. So first, we're going to look at, and again, this is Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, but first we're going to look at verses 18 and 19. This is Prabhupada's translation. And the way that he translates these 2 verses is he puts them together. And there's good reason why, actually, because it's a list of various practices, behaviors, etc., that we are meant to practice ourselves in order to indeed know God and to be very dear to God. So let's first read this verse and then we will analyze it. And the verse proceeds in this way. One who is alike to friends and enemies, who is equipoised in honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, fame and infamy, who is always free from contamination, always silent, and satisfied with anything, who doesn't care for any residence, who is fixed in knowledge and engaged in devotional service, is very dear to me. So these are the words of Bhagavan Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. And now let's go through this a little bit. You'll notice that in the very beginning, certainly, there are quite a few different pairings that are here, dualistic sorts of pairings. So first of all, let's go through some of these with the idea, of course, that first of all, why does Krishna have all these pairings, all these dualities that are here? So hot and cold, friends and enemies, etc., etc. First and foremost, it is with the idea, and I always have to explain this again and again and again, which I don't mind doing. It's something that's hard for most, even spiritual people, to fully comprehend. And that is that Krishna is not saying that we are to become literally dumb and not have the ability to see the difference between these pairings. It's not what Krishna is saying. It's not that Krishna is saying that, oh, we shouldn't just very practically wish to have, let's say, close proximity to one of these versus another one of these various pairings. It's not what Krishna is saying. Krishna is not asking us to be impractical. Rather, what Krishna is asking us to do is, as he does all throughout the Bhagavad Gita, to be detached, to see these various dualities that are there, to understand the difference between the two, to naturally veer toward that which will help us to make spiritual progress, but at the same time, not be so attached to either to the point where we think that either of these pairings is our be-all and end-all. So thus, vairagya, detachment. This is the entire point of now this listing that's here. So with that, let's go through this a little bit. So first, Krishna says, one who is alike to friends and enemies. Now again, let's stop there. Now, for anyone who has read the Vedic scriptures, and especially any of the stories that are there, any of the histories, because there's an enormous amount of history. Let me just say this as a personal little aside. There is zero mythology in any of the Vedic scriptures. Mythology does not exist in even one Vedic scripture. Rather, there are stories which are true, and there are histories that are there. Well, when you read the Vedic scriptures, and again, especially those items that tend to be in story form, what you will see are many individuals, including kshatriyas, that is warriors, including kings, including, for that matter, even rishis, even very exalted saintly beings who, do they make a distinction between, oh, this person is a friend, this person is an enemy? Yes, they do. And again, we see this again and again. Indeed, Krishna himself had the ability to recognize that this is a demonic individual, so thus an enemy. This is a good individual, and thus a friend. So again, this goes back to the point that I was making originally. It's not that Krishna is asking us to be literally dumb in the dictionary sense of that term. That is, our senses are not working. That's not what Krishna is asking us, because again, you read the stories of the Mahabharata, of the Ramayana. In the Ramayana, Rama himself recognized Ravana as a demonic being, as being the enemy. So again, we have the ability to see this. Rather, what Krishna is asking us here is that as yogis, while we can see this ability, this difference that is there, while we have the ability to function in the world seeing these differences, inwardly we're not attached to the differences, but rather we see friend and enemy alike, meaning what? That we have what is called samadarshinaha. Krishna, in another place in Bhagavad Gita, says that the sage has samadarshinaha. What does that mean? That means equal vision, that you understand that, yes, that's my enemy, I get it, I may have to sadly go to war with that person, here is my friend, oh, come close to me, let me embrace you. But ultimately we understand that both are Atman. This bad person who's chosen the bad path, deep within, if you go past that person's illusion, you will see that individual is an eternal soul. The same thing with the good person, an eternal soul. So this is what Krishna is asking us, that, oh, we see the distinction and we function in a very practical manner, but at the same time, we don't see merely the distinction, but that we understand that, yes, ultimately, each living being is a unit of consciousness. For that matter, forget about just human beings who one is an enemy, one is a friend. When we encounter a dog, when we encounter a cat, a bird, an elephant, a cow, any living being, when we encounter a god, indeed, when we encounter a demon, and not just meaning a bad human, I mean a demon, we understand that everyone is on their specific journey due to their own individual desire and resultant karma. But despite that fact, deep within, they are an Atman. They are a soul. So this is what Krishna is asking us, is that we have spiritual vision, what, again, he himself calls samadarshinaha. That is, we have that vision to see beyond merely the body, merely the surface, and to see within the person. So this is what Krishna is saying here. Now let's go on. Who is equipoised in honor and dishonor. So indeed, again, this can be misunderstood, and it should not be. Is Krishna saying here that we should treat the honorable path and the dishonorable path the same? Absolutely not. And how do we know this? Well, in other places, and throughout the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic scriptures as well, he makes it very clear, and indeed the Vedic scriptures make it clear, that above all things we are to always be honorable. So this is not what Krishna is saying. So one who tries to take, let's say, a very infantile, very childlike, very childish sort of Nietzschean sort of approach to this. Good and bad, it's all the same, it's all the same. Yeah, that's something a child says. No, an adult realizes that, no, there's a vast difference between being an honorable manusha, an honorable man. Man, not in the gender sense, but meaning human. There's a vast difference, a vast gulf of difference between being honorable and being dishonorable. And the Arya, the noble individual who is following the Vedic path, always, always, always chooses the honorable path and that path alone. So this is not what Krishna is saying here. What he's talking about here is honors that are given to us, that are conveyed upon us, and then dishonors that are conveyed upon us. Now, again, we understand the distinction. We're not stupid. Do we wish to receive honors? Well, we do, and for good reason. We should receive honors if we are honorable. That's always a nice thing. However, with whatever happens to us, if one group of people honors us, another group dishonors us, with whatever happens in this regard, we internally are fine. We are centered. We are transcendent. No matter what, we are always transcendent. So this is what Krishna is saying. Not that, somehow, when you become a spiritual person, suddenly you lose your senses and you can't see the distinction between honor and dishonor, friend and enemy, etc., etc. No, it's not what Krishna is saying. What Krishna is saying is dualities will come to you in life, regardless of whether you want them to or not. That being the case, always choose the good, but if the bad comes to you, pain, suffering, etc., etc., understand that you are eternal spirit soul, that you are consciousness, and that you are infinitely above any of these dualities that come your way. And in this way, what do you have? Among other things, what do you have? Peace. Peace. Let's go on. Heat and cold. That's easy to understand. Heat and cold. So what does this mean? This means that we tolerate. This means we don't complain all the time. Again, we want to survive. If we find ourselves in a climate where it's 15 degrees and the only thing we're wearing is a sweatshirt, it's not that we pretend that the cold is not there. No, you seek heat, and then vice versa. If you're in a desert-like environment and it's 120 degrees, you try to seek someplace that's cooler, etc. But this is not what Krishna is saying. What he's saying is we become tolerant. In other words, if right now it's a little bit too hot, if right now it's a little bit too cold, we don't complain and complain and complain. Rather, do we seek to alleviate ourselves of that discomfort? Sure, sure. But we do so with dignity. We do so with dignity. We don't complain and complain and complain and whine and whine and whine. Rather, we have that detachment such that we say to ourselves, yes, it's uncomfortable right now. You know, that is Krishna's will. Nothing I can do about it right now. I'm just in this situation. I'm driving my car to work, and unfortunately, my air conditioner died yesterday, and oh yeah, it's 99 degrees out. It's uncomfortable. Well, I can complain in my mind all the way to work, or I can just say, yes, this is God's will. Let me allow this to make me stronger. So what Krishna is asking us to do is to do the latter. So let's go on. Happiness and distress. Happiness and distress. Oh, how many times have we covered this topic? In so many contexts, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in so many different ways. And this is speaking, of course, very generally of this entire principle of detachment that we're speaking about. And that is that, indeed, we live in a world of this duality, where one moment we're happy, one moment we're distressed, and the next moment we're happy, and then the next moment after that we're happy again, and then we're distressed, and on and on. And we have a lot of power in our hands as far as seeking a happy condition and avoiding distress. And again, as I've said, we're not unintelligent. If we have a choice, we choose the happy versus the distress. We certainly choose that, but at the same time, we don't always have control. And sometimes, even though we did everything right that day, the last few days, that week, we did everything right, something will happen to distress us. There's someone at work who doesn't like us. There's drama going on. We lose something. Where are my keys? Oh my God, where's this? Where's that? Something happens. Something happens. Well, when that occurs, the question is, what do we do with that fact? Number one, we understand that indeed, I'm in distress now, but it's not going to last. Just like, sadly, happiness doesn't last, distress also doesn't last, and eventually I'll be happy again. But also, we do our best to rise above it. We do our best to simply be in a transcendent state of mind, regardless of anything that happens to us. So indeed, we see both happiness and distress as alike, again, in this spiritual sense. Let's go on. Fame and infamy. Fame and infamy. Let me talk about this for a second. Again, everyone would prefer fame versus infamy, which is the opposite. There's nothing wrong with preferring fame over infamy. Again, we see the difference. However, this is an interesting question that we need to ask ourselves. How many individuals are famous today and radically, infinitely, undeservingly? How many worthless celebrities have come out of the Hollywood factory or the music production factory that exists today, and they actually have very little talent. They trained them how to dance. But they actually have very little musical talent, acting talent, etc., artistic talent. Oh my God, how many so-called artists are there today? Painters, sculptors, modern artists who they're devoid of really any talent, but yet they have fame, miraculously, somehow, by design. And then how many good people have there been, not just today, but throughout the history of humanity? How many people have there been who have given every ounce of who and what they are to the betterment of others, and yet, at least in their lifetime, they received infamy. They were persecuted. They were treated like the worst person on earth. Can you think of a few people like this throughout history? There have been hundreds. There have been thousands. So it's a very interesting thing. When Krishna here speaks of fame or infamy, we need to think about this in this greater context. You can be a good person. You can be a person who is selfless, and yet the powers that be will treat you like a criminal. Now, this is the thing. Are you to allow this to affect you and to affect your decisions about your life and what you are to do in the future? Of course not. If you're doing good, you continue to do good, even if it's unpopular. Even if there are Twitter wars and people criticizing you and calling you every name in the book, etc., because you don't fit their definition of morality, their definition of ethics, their definition of what it means to be a good person. And the thing is, even the demonic people have their definition of all of these things, and of course they're wrong. They're wrong. So this is why, if you are on a good path, if you are doing good for others, you may receive fame or you may receive infamy. And then maybe after you've passed away in 100 years afterwards, oh, you'll have that fame again. Because that's often how it occurs. But regardless of what comes your way, keep doing good. Keep doing good. Keep doing good. Regardless of whether people appreciate you, whether people pat you on the back and congratulate you, whether people think, oh, you're an enemy of humanity because they're brainwashed. Whatever occurs, continue to do good in all ways. Now let's go on a little bit more, because now these pairings come to an end and we go to several other teachings that are here. Who is always free from contamination. Who is always free from contamination. How many times, again and again and again, in different ways, using different terminology, how many times have we seen Krishna speak about this? And all throughout the Vedic scriptures, that we are to achieve purity, that we are to be free from the opposite, from impurity, from contamination, etc. Well, here Krishna is yet again telling us, giving us this message, that what does it mean to be free from contamination? Well, let's examine this for just a short time. When we talk about contamination, what does Krishna mean by this? Well, if we find ourselves in illusion in any way, then we are contaminated by that illusion. It's almost like a poison. It's almost like an ineffable poison that is there within our mind, such that because we are in illusion, we cannot make right decisions. On the contrary, we always choose the wrong thing, those things that will harm us, those things that will destroy our health, those things that will give us less wisdom, those things like drugs that will take us further away from reality rather than delivering actual reality, and on and on and on. I could probably do a list for the next hour of in how many ways we find ourselves contaminated. Well, here Krishna is saying that the person he is speaking of in these two verses, that is someone who is dear to him, is always free from contamination. Well, how do we free ourselves from contamination? By introducing its opposite. You have a poison within you, within your body, let's say. What do? You introduce the cure. You introduce the opposite. Well, in the same way, spiritually speaking, in a way, we're contaminated. If we are materialistic, if we're atheistic, if we're hedonistic, if we're individuals who are selfish, who care only about ourselves, that is a contamination in the form of illusion. How are we to rid ourselves of this contamination? We introduce the cure. And the cure is truly the spiritual. Not merely what is called the spiritual, not merely what is, let me put it this way, marketed as the spiritual today, but that which is truly, authentically the spiritual. We introduce wisdom into our lives, not wisdom from some person who just started a YouTube channel a year ago. No. You see, it's interesting for so many millions of individuals who claim that they're on the search for wisdom, they want to acquire wisdom, they want wisdom, etc., 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 and yet who don't even have the first clue where to look. The answer is actually deceivingly simple. Look to that ancient wisdom that is already there. If it's modern, it's not wisdom. If it's modern, it's not spiritual. If it's modern, it's a lie. Look for that wisdom that has withstood not the ages, but eternality, that has always been here, that always shall be here. And where do you find this? You access this through the Vedic scriptures, through the Vedas themselves, the Upanishads, the Puranas, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, etc., etc. This is how we access wisdom, is in this way. So we access wisdom. We attempt to have a personal relationship with God, meaning our consciousness in communion with that infinite consciousness. How do we do this? We do this via meditation. We do this by shutting our eyes and taking absolute shelter of the names of God in complete peace, in complete calm, with complete devotion, meditating. Om Namo Narayana, Om Namo Narayana, and meditating upon God and communing with Him. And in this way, due to that proximity to God, our communing with God in meditation, all contaminations are burnt away. The example that's given is that it's like God is the sun. And here you have a little, not even a pond, just a little bit of water on the side of the sidewalk. It's maybe like 2 gallons of water, but it's contaminated, it's dirty. Well, allow the sun to beat down on that little puddle. Long enough, that puddle disappears. In the same way, that contamination that is there within us, when we bathe our inner self in the presence of God, in the same way that sun reduces that puddle to nothingness, any inner contaminations that are there also become burnt away into nothingness. So this is how we rid ourselves of this contamination. We acquire wisdom, but also meditation. And of course, there's more to this path, but those are the 2 most important things. So now let's go on. This individual is always silent. 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 This is something that I've stressed to quite a few of my disciples, actually, but it's something I've spoken about in the past. An individual who is wise is not an individual who is always talking, blabbering. On the contrary, what we've seen throughout history is that those individuals who have true spiritual depth and philosophical force to them are individuals who don't need to talk. Oh, they will, to help others. They will, if you ask them a pertinent question. But otherwise, they are individuals who have what in the Srimad Bhagavatam is called atmarama. That is, they are satisfied in themselves. They don't need to talk. Rather, they're satisfied in communing with their own Atman, Atmarama. And this being the case, when they're not teaching, when they're not speaking about something of importance, they're quiet. They're quiet. I've told a few people this story. It's a very personal story. And I've never said this story publicly, actually, but I will now as an example. For myself, even as a child, I tended to be very quiet. I was a book reader. All my life, I was a book reader, even when I was very young, even when I was 7, 8, 9 years old. And in my family in New York, I was known. I was known as being, oh, yes, he doesn't talk to people. If there's a family gathering, he'll tend to be in a corner either by himself or even reading a book. Sometimes I would bring books with me to family gatherings, etc. And I remember this one gathering where maybe I was around 12 years old or something like that. And I had an uncle who was there in this family gathering, and great guy, wonderful guy. But he was very boisterous, he was a very charismatic Italian guy. And I remember him going up to my dad and saying, hey, your son, what's wrong with him? How come he never joins us? He never makes small talk or anything. He should join us. He should talk to us. He should make some small talk. And I remember my dad, who was a very gentle person, becoming a little bit irate. And he said back to this relative, he doesn't make small talk. He only makes big talk. And that is what is meant. is that we don't simply speak for the sake of speaking. We don't simply speak to entertain people, just to make small talk, etc. But rather, if you wish to truly be a spiritual person, then in a very dignified way, what you need to do is speak when necessary. And when you do speak, make sure it counts. So always silent and satisfied with anything. So indeed, this is what the yogi also is like. This is what the bhakta, the devotee, also is like. Now again, I need to reiterate this and stress this again and again and again and again. Do they recognize the difference between something that's very high quality and something that's just okay? Of course they do. Of course they do. Can they have preferences? Of course they can. But this is the distinction between the ordinary person versus the person who is a sage, who is someone who is a truly spiritual person. They can recognize the difference between different things. However, they're happy with whatever is given them. They're happy with whatever occurs. They can appreciate very good food. They can appreciate the most wondrous, the most delicious, let's say, Indian food, Italian food, Thai food that's created for them by chefs. If it's presented to them, they'll eat it, they'll appreciate it, they'll recognize, yes, this is good food. But if they're given a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, they're satisfied. This is what's meant. They can recognize, but they are satisfied. Let's go on. Who doesn't care for any residence? Indeed, this also again has to do with detachment. Again, to repeat this again and again. They recognize the difference between various residents that, yes, this is a nice home. This home's very simple. But whatever comes their way as far as a residence, they have that satisfaction, understanding that everything is a gift from God. They can sleep in the most luxurious bed beyond the king size with beautiful poles and canopy, etc., in a massive, beautiful bedroom, or they can sleep in a tiny bedroom that is Spartan and has nothing. And regardless of where they're living, how they're sleeping, etc., they appreciate that everything is the gift from God. So, and then finally, these two things, but I'll deal with them separately. Who is fixed in knowledge? So again, who has this wisdom, who cultivates wisdom, who lives in wisdom all throughout their life. You see, by fixed in knowledge, it is not merely meant that, the person is just a book reader. The person just loves to read and read and read. No, they are fixed in knowledge. In other words, that knowledge, that jnana, that wisdom is something that they endeavor to live, but then it gets to the point eventually where the endeavoring is over and they are merely indeed living wisdom. They are living it without even endeavoring. It's effortless. So this is what is meant by this. And engaged, finally, in devotional service. Engaged in devotional service. So engaging in bhakti. And again, in these same two stages, that initially, when one is practicing bhakti, you are indeed practicing bhakti as a sadhana. That is that, you want to have devotion, you have a little bit of devotion. There's no such thing as a person who even wishes to engage in the path of bhakti yoga unless they have a little bhakti. Certainly, that seed has to be there. But in the first stage, in the initial stage, you are indeed practicing. In other words, you are cultivating, you're making yourself have bhakti. Nothing wrong with making yourself do something initially. Try to learn an instrument. Try to do, again, anything in which it is the acquisition of knowledge with experience. You have to make yourself do it at first. It's a practice. But then the second stage of bhakti, or the higher stage, is one in which, it's no longer just practice. It's no longer just sadhana. Rather, you are truly experiencing that devotional consciousness, that devotional awareness in such a way that indeed you are communing with God intimately and perfectly. So this is what Krishna is saying here. And now let me talk about this very briefly. I mentioned how, these are two different things. How there's being fixed in knowledge and engaging in devotional service. For the individual who is truly advanced spiritually, the truth of the matter is they're one. That wisdom and that devotion become one. Thus, this is one reason, for example, why one of the titles actually of Prabhupada itself being a title, but one of his titles was indeed Bhakti Vedanta, A.C. Bhakti Vedanta, Swami Prabhupada. So even in his very name, you have the coming together of these two things. With Vedanta, there is knowledge, there is wisdom, but with bhakti, with devotion. So indeed, this is what the perfected bhakti yogi, the perfected bhakta looks like. You are meeting an individual who has perfect wisdom, but permeated through and through with devotional awareness and consciousness of God. And indeed, at this stage, they're one. One has wisdom as a tool for devotion. They're one. And then finally, to finish this verse, such a person, Krishna says, is very dear to me. So like with all these verses, if we indeed follow what these verses are saying, we too can become dear to God. Now we have one more verse to look at, and this is a shorter verse. So we will look at this before we have any questions from people. The next verse, and the last verse we'll be looking at in this series, is again Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, and now this is verse 20. And the verse proceeds in this way. He who follows this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engages himself with faith, making me the supreme goal, is very, very dear to me. So very nice. So much to say about this verse, but I'm going to try to go through this a little bit quickly, only due to time. I do want to take questions from people. How amazing is it that Krishna ends this series with this verse to encourage us? He tells us first, what is the path? Do this, do this, do this, do this. But then he ends with these very, very encouraging words. So let's go through this. He who follows this imperishable path. Let's stop there. So again, the path for knowing God is not something that's made up. It's not something that some new age fraud creates. Oh, I've got a new idea. Let me create a website, try to become rich. No, it's not some new sect that comes onto the scene. It's not some new idea, etc., etc. Rather, if we are going to be following the true path for knowing ourselves perfectly, for knowing God intimately, and for living our lives in such a way that we are a blessing to all beings who cross our path, then we are to follow that path which is eternal. What is that path? What is that path? And as people know, unlike the frauds, I don't shy away from this at all. I tell you the truth. There's a Sanskrit name for this path, and Sanskrit is the oldest language in creation. That path is Sanatana Dharma, literally the eternal natural way. This is the path, and it is indeed eternal. This path that we speak about every single week and more, because it's not just these live streams. I give many other talks as well. I teach students individually, but this path that we talk about and talk about and talk about is eternal. It has existed for the last 2,000 years, the last 5,000, the last 10, 100,000, the last million. It has existed since before the creation of this one specific universe that we are in, and it will always exist. This is Sanatana Dharma, the eternal natural way. And now, Krishna goes a little bit deeper than even this. He who follows this imperishable path of Bhakti Yoga. And indeed, within this path of Sanatana Dharma, the very apex as far as practice is indeed what is called Bhakti Yoga. That is what Prabhupada very correctly, very beautifully translates as devotional service. This is the very apex of practice. And the reason why, without going very deeply into this, because there are many videos that we have out if you do a search on our channel. where we go very deeply into the nature of Bhakti Yoga. But very simply, the reason why Bhakti Yoga is the very highest path is because it represents in spiritual motion the very opposite problem that occurred to begin with for why we are experiencing false ego. We're experiencing false ego. We're experiencing misidentity. Bhakti Yoga is the very opposite of that in every way. But now let's go on. And who completely engages himself with faith. Now Krishna is explaining how in this entire series that we've been looking at of how do you become dear to God, it's not enough merely to do the motions. You must do the motions with faith. You must do the motions in such a way that you do them with trust. You see, another way of saying faith is simply trust. Simply trust. What is the basis, at least one of the most important, the bases of love? It's trust. If you can't trust, you can't love. Well, love is synonymous, trust is synonymous with faith. So this is what Krishna is saying here, is you must practice in such a way that you trust. You trust the path. You trust Krishna saying, you trust me, that is, you trust Krishna. You trust his teachings. You trust the Vedic scriptures. You trust the Guru. You trust whatever other authentic guides are there to help you along the path, etc. You have faith. And that faith is your fuel, such that you won't just give up, but that you will continue with this path. You see, the way that we make progress is with patience and by understanding that indeed, unlike New Age nonsense, there's nothing magical, there's nothing commercial about this. Oh yes, you pay me enough money. The more money you pay me, the quicker you'll have enlightenment. No. 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 There is no payment for this path. The only payment that there is sincerity. That's the only payment that there is. And this being the case, it has to be understood that you will be on this path for as long as it takes. And if that takes multiple years, if it takes 20 years, 50 years, that's fine. You have that trust, you have that faith, you see the progress that you're making each day, each week, each year, and you continue until you finally achieve the goal. But this is a path that takes time. That being the case, you must have that faith as your fuel to keep you inspired as you are slowly making that spiritual progress, without which life has no meaning. Let's go on. Making me, and then this is the last thing really that Krishna says here as far as inspiring us, making me the supreme goal. So again, Krishna does not play games. He doesn't mince words. There's no other way of interpreting the very clear Sanskrit, which I know intimately, as well as the very clear English translation, making me the supreme goal. So Krishna is saying, yes, indeed, the supreme goal is God, and God is the supreme goal. Nothing lesser, not, oh, I'm on the spiritual path, hoping that it will help me find a mate, hoping that it will give me material prosperity. Oh, if I'm on the spiritual path, maybe I'll win a lottery then. No. Don't waste this opportunity. You have found a spiritual path here, that is true. Use this path for what it was designed for, and that is to give you the greatest of all gifts, the greatest of all treasures, a treasure that is actually beyond your present comprehension, and that is to know God himself. This is why we practice spirituality. Not wish fulfillment, not law of attraction, not, oh, let me wish really hard and I'll get a Mercedes-Benz. You have the ability to know God, the source of all, by following this path. Follow it with sincerity. Follow it with humility. Follow it to the very end. And if you do follow this path of Sanatana Dharma, I guarantee you, and beyond me, all the rishis of the past guarantee that you will know God. You will have everything. So Krishna, in a way, ends in this way, saying, no, don't make that Mercedes-Benz your supreme goal. Don't make law of attraction your supreme goal. Make me your supreme goal. Krishna says. I who am the source of everything that you are. I who am indeed your very best friend. And indeed, Krishna ends by saying, that individual is very, very dear to me. Now, did you catch the subtlety of that last clause? With all the other clauses, Krishna says, oh, that person is very dear to me. Here it's different. He says that person is very, very dear to me. Just to reiterate, just so that we have no confusion about this, that individual, it is guaranteed, will know God. If you practice everything that has been said, even in just these verses that we've looked at for this series of 3 videos, you will be dear to God. If you practice this, again, with sincerity, with humility, etc., you will be dear to God. And what greater thing is there to be? So with that, I thank you very much for listening to my talk. And if anyone has any pertinent philosophical questions about the Vedic tradition, about Sanatana Dharma, then please feel free to ask, and it would be my pleasure, my humble pleasure, to answer your questions. Very good. Here's a nice, very practical, but good question from Jasmine Knight, and I will answer this. And it is Namaste. I have started reading Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam, and I have a set of cantos 1 to 10. Do you recommend a specific translation for cantos 11, and I assume you're saying 11 and 12, because there are 12 cantos altogether? Let me talk about this for a moment, actually. As many people may know, Prabhupada indeed translated the Srimad Bhagavatam, and of the 12 cantos, he ended several chapters into the 10th canto, and then at that point, very sadly, he left us. And let me say, generally speaking, of all the translations of Srimad Bhagavatam, and I have most, I don't have all of them here in my library, but I have several of them actually. By far, Prabhupada's is the best. That's a given. That almost goes without saying. Prabhupada's is the best. Now, the rest of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that is the rest of Canto 10, as well as 11 and 12, were indeed translated by one of Prabhupada's disciples several years after Prabhupada left us. And let me just say, those are fine for a reference work. That is the ISKCON translations of, again, the end of the 10th canto as well as 11th and 12th. I would certainly get them just to have them and to look through them to get a very, very good idea of the gist of the rest of the Srimad Bhagavatam. However, those translations cannot in any way, shape, or form compare to Prabhupada's translations and commentary as well. The translation and commentary that was done with the rest of the Srimad Bhagavatam, again, fine as a reference work, but do not take it as being as authoritative as Prabhupada's translation of the previous cantos in any way. But if it's a matter of, oh, should I get that? Yes, certainly. Certainly. Feel free to have it. But don't equate it to Prabhupada's translation. Very nice. Nice. Here's a question from Draco Distortion, and it is Namaste Acharya. How can we resist adharmic urges in the Kali Yuga? Jai Shri Guru. Very nice. Let me say, first of all, good question, but it's kind of general. If maybe in the future you can give some examples, because of course this can cover so many things, so many different things, hundreds and thousands of things. But let me give you a general answer, since it's a general question. The way that we can resist adharmic urges in the Kali Yuga is 2 things, actually. Number 1, practice, practice, practice the opposite. So whatever those adharmic urges are, and I'm just going to give some examples, let's say a person has the urge to take drugs, to smoke marijuana, for example, or whatever it is, cocaine. If a person, let's say, has an attraction to alcohol, well, why are they doing this? They're trying to achieve some sort of cheap bliss. Well, cultivate the opposite. Indeed, we can experience real bliss, natural, organic bliss that doesn't have to come by taking something external and ingesting it. Rather, we can experience the bliss of our own self, our own consciousness, and more, we can experience the bliss that is God. And what does this mean? Everything that we've been talking about. You practice, practice, practice meditation on the names of God. You practice spirituality, etc. That's the first thing. So indeed, cultivate the opposite of what is adharmic. And then, generally speaking, the second thing is this: seek good association whenever and wherever you can. So often, why are people attracted to adharmic urges in the Kali Yuga? To quote you exactly: bad association, bad environment, bad influence, etc. So that being the case, what we are to do is to seek people who represents the very opposite of adharma as much as possible. And this is something that indeed the scriptures, including Bhagavad Gita, actually talk about, how good association is of crucial importance if we are to grow personally and spiritually. Seek those individuals who are like that unto which you wish to be. Seek those individuals who personify, who model that which you want to be yourself, and associate with them. Talk to them. If they are individuals who are literally physically in your company, get together with them. If you're unfortunate enough that you don't have such people in your neighborhood, etc., and you can't physically get together with them, do it online. Do it in whatever way you can. This is why we have our Discord channel, our Discord server, for example. We have hundreds of individuals who are on there who are wonderful association. People who are my more advanced students, individuals who are on the path, who themselves, they're asking questions, but very sincerely so, etc. So seek such association as much as possible. So if you do these two things, you will be able to overcome the adharmic urges in your life and in the Kali Yuga. Very good. Very good. Sopor 777, and I love your avatar image from Lord of the Rings, or from Tolkien, I should say. I love that very much. And you ask, hello, how does one become in sync with the natural way? And what are the beginning steps? Thank you. Very good. I looked at your question before I actually read it, and my mind works extremely quickly. So I kind of scanned everything, and this is the answer, actually. And even though it may seem a little bit self-serving, it's not, because I don't make profits from these books. It is the answer, actually. And that is, I would ask that you please, first and foremost, get this book, Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way. You can get this on dharmacentral.com. You can get this on Amazon. I believe even Barnes & Noble has it, etc. But get this book, Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way. It is the magnum opus. It is the Summa Theologica for understanding precisely what is the natural way, exactly what you're asking about. And it explains both philosophically as well as very practically, as far as actual practice, what it means to live in such a way that indeed you are living in sync with the natural order. So please purchase that book, but don't just stop there. Purchase the book, read the entire thing, and then again, if you have not yet done so, please join our Discord server, speak to others, and they will help you to incorporate the practices in your life in such a way that you will experience what it means indeed to be in sync with the natural order, with the natural way. So that is a beginning. That's the beginning step that I would say. Please get that book. Mm. Good. Here's a nice question from Varsaga. Namaste Acharyaji. How does one practice sense restraint when we are bombarded with sensuality in our society? One can logically understand sensuality is harmful, but still fall prey to their desire. Indeed, a selfish form of sensuality is something that indeed is harmful, spiritually speaking, and sense restraint uh, is something that is extremely important, actually. This is spoken of in the Yoga Sutras and all throughout the Vedic scriptures. And let me say this as I can speak about this very deeply, but let me start with this, actually. Just state this in a very simple way. Yes, indeed, we are bombarded 24 hours a day with sense stimulation. That's the modern world. It's demonic. And the reason why I say it's demonic is because most of that sense stimulation is done to simply grab money from us, to suck money from us. So thus we have everything. We have media, we have social media, we have our cell phones, we have so much that just tries to grab our attention to sell us things, etc. A person cannot be a yogi in such an environment. And anyone who tells you otherwise is not a yogi. They literally don't know what they're talking about. No, indeed, we understand that if an individual is going to practice spirituality, we need to be in an environment in which we are experiencing the very opposite of all this sense stimulation. Now, of course, what does this mean practically? Most people can't just literally physically remove themselves and geographically transpose themselves into a more natural, quiet, peaceful environment. So what do? We do what we can with what we have. And that is, in the same way that to fast is a good idea once in a while, and fast from many different things. Oh, you're drinking too much coffee. Give it a break for a few weeks. Even literal fasting. These are things that are detoxing in so many ways. Well, in the same way, we are to detox the senses. How do we do this? We do this, of course, you know what I'm going to say, certainly through meditation, but we can also do this while doing things as well, not merely in meditation. So, for example, oh my Lord, so many people, I've known so many families for whom, for example, they have the television blaring practically 24 hours a day. People are doing things, the TV's in the background, blaring. People are eating at the dinner table, the television is in the next room, blaring, etc., etc. Well, you can do even your daily activities in such a way that you remove such impositions upon the senses that really, truthfully, wreck our nerves. We may be conscious or unconscious of this, but to have our senses constantly stimulated destroys our nerves. This is one reason why people are in so much anxiety today. So you can choose to do everything that you are doing, but do it in such a way that you're fasting from this sensory stimulation. That is, do it in quiet. If you're in an apartment, if you're in your home, choose for a little while. It doesn't have to be constantly, but say today, everything that I do will be quiet. I'm not going to have things blaring. I'm not even going to have music playing, in fact. I'm going to try to make my environment as quiet as possible. And this is true for all the senses, etc. And go throughout your day in such a way that you do a little fast of all this sensory stimulation. So I would say try this. Again, there's much more that I can say, but I have to stop here because we're already a little bit over time. And I do want to try to answer one or two more questions. So I hope that's a helpful start. Purposefully do a fast of sensory stimulation whenever you can. And again, meditation itself, of course, is the perfect way to do this. But even without meditation, just in your daily activities, do a fast. Nice question. This is easily answered, actually. This is from Vedic Heartland, and it is Namaste Sri Acharyaji. Would helping my local Krishna temple in every way possible, cleaning the floor, cutting vegetables, etc., count as devotional service? Thank you, and Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Oh, it would absolutely count as devotional service. Indeed, this is the very meaning of devotional service. This is the meaning of bhakti seva, of literally service in devotion. So if you are fortunate enough that you have a Krishna temple near you, I would say, and it doesn't matter if it's ISKCON or Gaudiya Math or something else even, if you have a temple of Krishna that is there, to engage in the direct service of Krishna in that way is absolutely something that if you feel inspired to do, you should absolutely do. And it certainly does, you say it in what is to me almost a little bit of a humorous way. Does that count as devotional service? Oh, that is devotional service. So absolutely do that. Of course, what I would also say practically is devotional service occurs in a vast myriad of ways. In addition, please help the ISDS in any way that you can. And that means not just donations. That means not just being a serious volunteer. Spread our links everywhere that you can. Links to our videos, to our books, to dharmacentral.com, etc., etc. Also do devotional service by helping that movement that is literally on the very cutting edge of introducing pure bhakti, pure dharma to the world. Help us also. That also is devotional service. But in the meantime, if you want to engage your hands in devotional service, absolutely go to your local Krishna temple, grab a good mop and clean that temple floor. Prabhupada would say, as you clean the temple floor, in actuality, you're cleaning your own heart. So absolutely do that. Very nice. Here's a comment that I saw and I would like to read from Michael Maldonado. First of all, Michael, namaste. And you say, namaste Acharyaji, your live streams are a weekly glimpse of the golden age. Jaya Sriman Narayana. Thank you very much for saying that. That is our goal. Our goal is this, that we're living in a troubled world. You know, people are lonely, people are pained, people are depressed. We're trying to do exactly that. We're trying to give people a little glimpse of the spiritual, of Vaikuntha, of the spiritual realm, and indeed of the golden age to come. So thank you very much for that wonderful comment. Please give me just a few moments. I want to see, we're over time, but I want to see if maybe there's one more very simple question that I can answer here. So just give me a moment, please. Very nice. Maybe this will be, I think, the last question that I will ask, and it is from Rafael Beltran. It is, namaste, please accept my humble obeisances, and thank you for your great seva. Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for being here. And the question is, could you clarify being dear to the Lord, Sriman Narayana? Aren't all beings very, very dear to the Lord? Does Krishna have different levels of dearness? Very nice. Let me indeed answer this, actually. And this will reveal one aspect of the nature of God, one of an infinite number of different aspects of the nature of God, actually. Let me start by saying this. I'm going to make this very philosophical. Your question is similar to the question, oh, why should we do puja? Why should we visit a temple? Is it not the case that, oh, God is everywhere. God is in the air. God is in literally, God is sustaining every single atom of existence. So why go to a specific place, to a temple or to our altar at home, etc.? It's a similar question. In the same way that, yes, indeed, God is everywhere. That is true. But at the same time, isn't that the case that water is everywhere? There's water in the air right now. Water is literally everywhere. But if I want to drink water, I'm not going to lick the air. I can try, but I will die of dehydration. Rather, I go to a place where water is concentrated. And I drink. Such is the nature of, indeed, the natural order. In the same way, God may be everywhere, but there are certain places that, in accordance with Dharma, we can especially access God. Now, having said that, now let me answer your question here, because it's somewhat similar. So is it not the case that indeed all beings, even the smallest insect, all beings, as I was saying before, even demonic beings, in who they are as pure Atma, not their demonic activities, all beings are dear to God? So the answer is, of course, yes, indeed, all beings are dear to God. But God is a person, not a machine. And this being the case, even though all beings are dear to him, he has actually stated in the Bhagavad Gita that those who are dearest to him are his devotees. Those individuals who have chosen of their own free will to turn their vision toward him with humility and with devotion and to surrender unto him. And this is what it means that God is a personality. It's similar to this. If you're a father and you have 5 children, are all your children equal to you? Well, sure. Sure, they should be. But at the same time, this one child competed in a very difficult competition and comes home with a trophy. Well, now you turn your attention to that child, especially with love, and you put your arms around that child and you say, "Congratulations, I am so proud of you." Now, you're giving special attention to that child. Does that mean you no longer love the other 4 children? Or that you somehow love them less? Of course not. In the same way, yes, God loves all of his children, but at the same time, there's a special place in his heart for those children of his who indeed turn to him of their own free will in absolute and utter devotion and surrender at his feet. That is, his bhaktas, his devotees. So indeed, while God is dear to all beings and all beings are dear to him, at the same time, there's a special place in his heart for his specific devotees. So I hope that answers the question. Such is the nature of love. Very good. All right, with that, we are indeed over the time, so I am going to stop here. I apologize very much for other questions that I either have not seen yet or just haven't had a chance to answer. But this is why you come back next week and every single Monday is please continue to ask your questions. And if I see them, I will indeed answer your questions. So please don't give up. We have limited time. So hopefully I'll see your question next time if I didn't see it today. With that, again, I thank you all very much for being here. This was a beautiful series that we went through. I myself truly enjoyed going through these verses of Bhagavad Gita. This is one of my favorite sections, actually, of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna just explains how to be dear to him. And we will get together again next Monday. And this is our very first live stream of 2023. So that also makes me very happy. And I thank you especially for being here for our very first live stream of this year of 2023. So with that, namaste. Jaya Sriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Suravangsha Jayate. Victory to Sanatana Dharma. Victory to the Dharma nation. Victory to the Solar dynasty. Victory to the Vedic heartland. Victory to the International Sanatana Dharma Society. Evam bhavatu. May such victory be so. And so it shall be. Everyone, I ask you, between now and the next time that we get together, all of you in every way, please take very, very good care of yourselves.